I think many of us can relate to our episode topic today. We're starting our next theme, which is safety, but with a twist. Because as we've been researching this topic, we're learning that there is an illusion to safety. What seems safe for one person isn't always safe for somebody else. And such is the case with one's identity.
You know, Holland, I can really agree with that. And safety is relative. I know I tend to err on the side of caution, probably taking less risks when I think about safety. And when I consider identity, it's kind of like a continuum. I have different roles in life, life changes, history, lots of aspects that go into who I am in the world. And as they say, it's complicated.
Hi, I'm Holland Webb.
Hi, I'm Amy Boland.
And you're listening to The Afterword, a conversation about the future of words.
This is going to be a great conversation. We are excited to welcome Laurel Handfield, who is the owner and creator of Happy Island Press, a publisher that creates coloring and activity books for children of color. Welcome, Laurel.
Hi, great to be here. Thank you for having me on the show today.
And in addition, we have Greg Howard with us at the Afterword table. He is an author, a songwriter, and the co-owner of an independent record label in Nashville. And welcome, Greg.
Thanks, Amy. It has been many years since I've seen you, as I said earlier, but it's good to see you.
Yes, Greg and I have history. We went to college together. So, and so it's been wonderful to reconnect.
Yes.
Well, both of you have some rich personal backgrounds, and you're both amazing storytellers. So in 60 seconds each, would you mind sharing the Cliff Notes version of your life and who you are? And we'll start with you, Laurel.
Okay, great. Well, as stated, my name is Laurel Handfield, and I am the creator of Happy Island Press, which produces picture books and coloring books for young girls to help build up their self-esteem at an early age. Originally, I am from Pennsylvania, a little small town outside of Philadelphia, but I have been living here in the Bahamas for over 20 years after basically coming here for vacation and never leaving. I came here for a mini vacation, met a guy. We had a long distance relationship for about 2 years before moving to Maryland. And after a short stint in Silver Springs, we moved here in the Bahamas, and I've been here ever since with our 3 kids and 2 dogs.
Gee, Laurel, I don't know. That's a toss-up. Maryland, Bahamas. I don't know. Good choice.
That sounds amazing. We'll have to record the next podcast on location with Laurel.
Excellent.
Yes.
All right.
All right, Greg, what about you? What's the Cliff Notes version of Greg Howard?
Greg Howard, as you just said, I am the writer of middle grade and young adult books for and about queer kids. And I originally am from the low country of South Carolina. I grew up there and spent all my youth in South Carolina. All my books are set in South Carolina. And I grew up in an area of the country and at a time in the country that was just a powder keg of racial tensions. So that really informed who I became as a human. And also being gay in a very religious home was part of my identity growing and my identity learning. And it was the love of music and songwriting that eventually led me to Nashville after college. I literally loaded it up in my car and moved to Nashville the day I graduated and got sucked into the music business. And after 30 years in the music business, I actually retired yesterday from the music business. And now I'm just focusing on writing my books. And my latest book is called The Visitors. It's a middle grade ghost story set in South Carolina.
Retired. Well, I guess that's a kind of a congratulations, but I'm really sad because Greg has got the most amazing voice. So that kind of makes me sad. I know you're still singing, so that's good. Good.
Right.
Well, this is going to be a great conversation, but we're looking to you, Laurel and Greg, as our experts tonight as we talk about this topic of personal and social identity. And in order for us to help everybody feel more settled with terms, we're going to do a lightning round doesn't matter who takes the word, both of you can, or phrase, but let's just kind of get some terms under our belt. And the first one is the term social identifiers. What do we mean by that?
Well, I'll jump in.
Yeah.
And social identifiers. I mean, I think for me, what pops into my head is the way people perceive us. Maybe not necessarily who we are, but the way people perceive us. Okay,
good. Anything else to add to that, Laurel?
Actually, I would agree with that as well. But it's kind of, for me, it's kind of like, yes, how people see us, but it's like kind of like a group, like a membership in a group or something, like a culture or like a gender.
Okay. Like expand it a little bit.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this one is kind of it's not, I said I don't have to be versus, but maybe personal or versus social identity.
I can take that.
Go for it. Jump in.
Okay. Well, for me, I would say personal. It's just, again, how you see yourself, as opposed to like the social identity is kind of like how people see you. Like it's like a class or like a group.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What about you, Greg?
This one made me jump back to middle school for some reason, because, middle school, you're kind of hiding who you are until you find someone you feel safe with. And so it's like the personal being, who you really know deep down you are. But at that time in my life, I was hiding that, and I was somebody else completely on the social spectrum, even through college.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. This one, I think, has gotten a lot of talk about in the press, but let's talk about this from an identity perspective: privilege and oppression.
We'll go back and forth, Laurel. I'll jump in.
Oh, okay.
This also sent me back to childhood, because I did feel oppressed as a gay boy living in South Carolina, and felt like I had to hide myself. But I do recognize that, the time I lived through in South Carolina history, and even today, I did have privilege being a white gay boy, and knowing who I was, was much easier for me. I can only imagine, to exist in that world than if I'd been a person of color.
Okay. Go for it, Laurel.
Well, the same thing kind of here, like oppression, of course, being a Black female. I've been kind of discriminated against and, treated unjustly, from being younger. And even like today, it's kind of like you still see, of course, you said we see it in the news today. Now, on the flip side of that, when I was younger, I did have privilege, a little bit of privilege, because I was from like an upper middle class. So I would say, I've seen both sides of the coin.
Okay. Excellent. It's a tough topics, and I really appreciate the way y'all are digging in. We kind of hit with some hard subjects. This one was a little new for me, this concept of in-group and out-group. And that's just kind of new vocabulary as we're thinking about this topic.
See, now this one I had to kind of look up, because like you, it was kind of, I hadn't really heard of this category before, but it did bring me back to school. Like in-group to me was just kind of like your peers, typically like a small group of friends that you belong with that share the same interests. Now for out-group, for me, that was just people that were not in your particular peer group.
Okay.
So it was kind of like high school, like cliques.
Okay. All right. I see Greg nodding. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I'll flip it to the adult side. queer people always talk about finding your chosen family. And of course, that's what I did when I left college and came to Nashville. I found my chosen family because I was rejected by my biological family. So then that very tight knit group of 4 or 5 people became my in group for decades. And my out group even included my family. And of course, people I work with and friends who didn't really know me for who I am. But it just kind of jarred me when I thought that my family became one of my out groups.
Yeah. Boy, that's tough. It's interesting too. I think about this even in the workplace. You have people who are in the in group, people in the out group, it's so we're going to talk about that a little bit more as well. All right. And then this last term, discriminatory harassment. What are we talking about with that?
Well, I mean, gosh, there's so much with that term, for me, again, I enjoy a lot of privilege being a white man, working my 30 years in the music business in mostly, basically all white companies. And where I saw the discriminations was some because of who I was. I did experience some of that, but not as nearly as much as what I saw coming at people of color, people of different religions, especially, because there's a big Christian music industry here in Nashville. And so people who live outside of that white Christian cisgender kind of music industry world are always on the outside here.
Mm. Okay. What about you, Laurel?
Now, for me, discrimination, I felt that from the very beginning. I mean, that was just from going to school. I lived in a predominantly white neighborhood. So, I didn't have a lot of peers that, looked like me and had a lot of the same interests that I did. So I felt that in the beginning, just of my life. Mm-hmm. Later on down the line, I had to deal with discrimination in the workplace. And I worked in corporate for about 15 years before moving to the Bahamas. And it was almost the exact same thing, but with adults. It would be like subtle things like, didn't have to be overt. It would just be like, maybe you didn't get that promotion or things like that. But yeah, I felt it, still feel it today.
Okay. Well, Holland, we have some experts here who are joining us on this episode of the podcast, and I'm really glad we're starting with this topic in this theme of safety. It's vital, it's important, it's so relevant. So thank you all for getting the term set, and let's get some conversation started, Holland.
Well, would you share some from your own personal story? What have been some barriers and what have been some of the positive things about identity for you? And maybe things that could apply to anyone.
Okay, I can start. Well, I stated earlier, those barriers started in my life early on. I was a young African-American girl in the 70s and the 80s in America. I lived in the suburbs, as I stated before, where people did not look like me. Not everyone had the same interests as me. I had blatant verbal attacks. People called me names. And as well as some nonverbal attacks like cutting your eyes or, just actual physical altercations. Now, this is what I experienced early on. Now, it's kind of like a double-edged sword because you wanted to give everybody a chance because some people have asked me before, like, how do you know it was discrimination? How do you know? They say you were passed up for that promotion because you weren't qualified. And that's just it. You don't know. But because you have experienced so much discrimination, it's just kind of like, you're kind of cognizant of it all the time. Now, some of the positives of that is that it helped me to rely on myself and not be a people pleaser, because there came a point where I could not do enough to make somebody like me. If they did not like me, they just didn't like me. whether, I was nice to them, whether I brought them cookies, whether, I asked them out to hang out. It just didn't matter. They just didn't like me. So the positives for me is that I stopped that. It was just kind of like, there's nothing I can do to change that. If you don't like me, then so be it. And that's where we stand today.
For me, the barriers, there were two big ones. The first being toxic masculinity, which, a lot of boys grow up around and feel the pressure of buying into. And of course, I felt that, living in the South and growing up in the 70s and 80s. And this pervasive feeling of this is what it means to be a man. You got to do A, B, C, D. I remember my dad. My brother was a father's. He was daddy's boy. I was mama's boy. So my brother was the one always out there, helping dad cut the grass and work in the yard, and I was in the house helping mama, do the house cleaning and all that kind of stuff. So that I did not fit within those parameters at all. I will say, fortunately, one of the positives to that one was that my dad was very easy showing tenderness, which taught me how to then show tenderness. He would, hug me all the time. He would kiss me on the cheek. He would tell me he loved me. So I did have that, which was very helpful to combat that toxic masculinity. But the other big barrier for me was the church. Just being, a gay boy growing up in a religious environment and being told at every turn that there's something wrong with you, that you're bad, that you're going to hell just because the way you are. And I remember as a kid, even through college, praying every night for God to fix me, quote unquote, to make me, to heal me, quote unquote. And it was miserable. And I did not want to live. That's what it led me to, a point where I didn't want to live. But the positive to that was when I came to Nashville and I met other Christian people who were also queer in some way. And I had to step away from the church entirely in order to learn how to find my way to faith. But I've always said, and it's shocking to some people, but my biggest barrier to loving myself was the church. Wow. Well, these are positives and hard truths that I'm sure many in our audience can relate to, because these are in some ways universal, especially when we think about some of the statistics. And one of the statistics came out of the National Center of Education, and they showed a drop in bullying cases from 2009 to 2019, so that 10-year window. But in that, there was an increase in reports by females and students of two or more races. Those statistics increased in bullying. And again, 59% surveyed the LGBTQ students felt unsafe at school. And we know that bullying does not just occur in the school, in the classroom. And by monster.com, they were saying that 94% of those responding to that survey had been bullied numerous times in the workplace. So my question, Laurel and Greg, is why is identity such a target for bullying? And how can we interrupt or reduce the trends? Laurel, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. What I believe is that identity is a target because personally, I think people fear what they don't understand. And, oftentimes they can become aggressive toward that which they have no knowledge of. And it's almost like a way, I guess they think they're protecting the self. Now, I've witnessed people who have been marginalized all their lives, but who then go on to bully another race or someone with a different sexual orientation. And my question is why? I don't get that. You understand and you know that it doesn't feel good because it has happened to you or is happening to you right now, but you're doing it to someone else. It's the same thing for me right here. It's just kind of I try to be as, open-minded as possible because it's I know what that feels like and it does not feel good. So, I think it's all about fearing that which we don't understand and, having it come out in the form of aggression. Mm-hmm. Now, how we can help reduce the trends. I would say basically mind our own business. I mean, it really is that simple. Someone else's skin color or who they lay with in bed is none of your concern. I mean, I'm saying, you don't have to have a kumbaya moment with the entire world. I'm just saying, does it have to come to an aggressive encounter? So, I would just say, just relax and just mind your own business and just understand that people have some empathy. People have feelings, just as you do. Everyone has feelings. So it's just kind of like, just relax and just chill.
There you go.
I mean, just to sum it up, really.
Okay. All right. Good word. All right, Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, the things you mentioned about bullying and LGBTQ kids really hits home with me. Suicide is the second leading cause of death of young people between the ages of 10 to 24. LGBTQ kids are 3 times as likely to have contemplated suicide than their non-LGBTQ peers, and they are 5 times as likely to have attempted suicide. So it's very scary, and it happens still every day. And I think one way that we can kind of change course is, we have a lot of bystanders. We need more upstanders. We need someone to say something, someone to do something, someone to protect. If you see someone in that situation being bullied, it's not enough certainly not enough just to walk away, but you have to become an upstander and say something and stop what's going on. It doesn't have to escalate. It just has to be interrupted. And then I love what, in another direction, I love what Laurel said about, within communities. I get so discouraged when I see usually white gay men who have disparaging attitudes towards lesbians, towards trans people, especially towards trans people. And like they don't get it and they don't want to try to get it, but to me, it's like we're all one community, and my God, we need all the support of each other that we can get. So I really don't understand that. And I don't really know what the answer to that one is, other than I try to talk to my friends, when I hear them say something, and I call them on it. So I guess it's a little more of the upstander thing.
Yeah, I love that. Another term that I got familiar with over the last year or so is the term ally. Is that we need to have allies in our communities, not just bystanders, as you were saying, Greg. I love that. Thank you all so much. This is really good information.
There have been public policy efforts to address discrimination. How would you suggest that we move from a public policy approach maybe to a practice-oriented approach? How can those of us who are not involved in public policy address discrimination in our everyday lives?
I'll jump in. I had a situation with this question, or had someone ask me this question when it came to the current book banning around the country, because several of my books have been banned in school districts. And they asked me, like, how's this going to change? What's going to stop? What's going to stop this from happening? And my answer to them is like, I honestly think it's going to take the students finding their voice and, standing up for their schools, their teachers, their librarians. There's going to be a teacher or a librarian at some point that's going to get fired, and the students have to become vocal, and their parents have to support them in that and become vocal with them. I don't see that changing until that group of people, the students and the parents of the students, speak out. Because what we're hearing right now is all the pro-banning voices in our legislature, in church, and we're not hearing enough from the people who are fighting it. They're out there, trust me. But their voices are squashed. But I really think when students step in, I think that's going to be when things change.
Okay. So more from a grassroots effort.
Right.
Okay.
On that issue.
Well, Laurel, what would you add to that?
Well, I would say first, I just kind of find it utterly ridiculous that we are still passing laws to basically force people to accept others. But, here we are. So, judgment aside, one of the ways that we can move forward is to, I think, exercise empathy. Now, what Greg was saying earlier about if you see something, then you need to say something, with the bullying. Yes, we need to step it up when it comes to, reporting things like that. But I just find it kind of sad still that we are, in crisis mode with, families dying in the Ukraine. We just spent the last 2 years in quarantine, but yet, people still find the time and energy to discriminate and hate on something that, really is not our business. So I would just say, you know what, at this point in the game, we just need to exercise a little bit of empathy and feel for the next guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talked about that on one of our very first episodes in our first season, of that concept of empathy and why that's so important. And I really appreciate that. So as we kind of close out this first episode, because we've got a lot more questions and more conversations, let's boil this down, this idea of personal social identity, this how we can ensure safety of all people in our communities. How can we boil this down into an essential element? So, Greg, I'm going to start with you first.
When we're young, and I always think about in college, Amy, especially when I first met you, my first 2 years, at that age and that stage of my life, I thought I had it all figured out. I thought I knew everything. And then the older I got, I realized the less I knew. So the essential element for me is to understand that this identity is a lifelong journey. It's not something you have figured out when you're 20 years old, just because you think you have. It is something you discover about yourself in every year and every decade. And I'm 56 years old and I'm still discovering things about my identity. But you have to get to a point where you're open to learning those things about yourself. So I would just say that the journey is a lot longer than some people want it to be. Excellent.
How about you, Laurel?
Again, I'm going to have to agree with you, Greg, on that one, because, I am 51 years old. And guess what? I've been Black all my life. And it is a journey. It really is. It's just, you go from one stage of, being in primary school to high school, and then you move on to high school to college, but it's almost like the same thing. It's almost like you're repeating the same things, like the same racism, the same discrimination. So it's not like a one and done. It's like, it really is. It really is a journey that I will be going through. Personally, I will be going through for the rest of my life. So, and I'm okay with that, because I am who I am, and I'm, proud of who I am. I couldn't say that years ago when I was younger, because I just, there was some, self-hating because people were hating on me. So, but today, it's a journey, and it's come to me appreciating and loving who I am, and, actually appreciating in others and loving who they are as well.
Really well said. Excellent. Thank you both. These were perfect ways to end this first episode.
And so with that, we'll say thanks to Laurel and Greg. This has been a powerful conversation. While you wait for part 2, please go to theafterwordpodcast.com and become a subscriber. Leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts, and tell your friends about us. And as always, you are welcome at our table.